3, 2, 1, go. Hello everyone, my name is Alex Shalaev and you're watching Testcontainers Live, a show where we invite incredible people from Java ecosystem, other languages ecosystems, and talk about the technologies that excite them, excite us, and probably would be pretty interesting to the community. Today, it is a great pleasure of mine to introduce our current guest, Anton Arhipov. Anton is a developer advocate at JetBrains, working on the Kotlin team, developing and advocating for this very interesting JVM language. Maybe not even the JVM language, but a more powerful language. Anton, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be on the stream.
Oh, this is my pleasure. This is my pleasure. If anyone watching, and if you don't know this fun trivia fact, this is a historic stream. This is for the first time ever, I think, on the stream, maybe ever on any video. We have all Java champions from Estonia present in a single screen. So we are currently
all two
both of us
both
of us are in the stream. Anton is also from Estonia. He lives in Tallinn. So if you're visiting this lovely city, ping him. I'm sure he will be absolutely happy to give you a couple of hints what to do there. So, okay, enough of the chit chat. Anton, can you tell a couple of words? What are you doing lately? What are the kind of priorities that you're working on? What are some of the projects that you think are exciting in the ecosystem?
Oh, in the whole ecosystem, or what I'm involved with?
No, what you're involved with, of course. I mean, yeah.
The Kotlin is the most important project for me, of course, and my kind of activities around Kotlin are mostly educational. So yesterday I was reading a 3 hours lecture at some university course, and that was pretty interesting because I never done like Kotlin basics talks, like talking from scratch and teaching people from scratch. Usually doing some I don't know, specific talks around Kotlin, and but my day-to-day job is to create content for Kotlin, users, for the developers who want to use Kotlin, want to learn about it. And I have kind of two main activities: creating videos on our YouTube channel. youtube.com/Kotlin is where we post everything. And I also work with some it's kind of the announcements of the releases, what's new in Kotlin, what are interesting feature there. And then I have my own sort of channel on that channel, on Kotlin YouTube channel. I have this how do you call it, like playlist, right? The playlist for Spring with Kotlin. So I try sometimes build small demos to educate people how to use Kotlin with Spring.
Oh, this is such an exciting combination. Spring is everywhere.
Yep.
Hopefully Spring will come to Estonia as well. I can't wait for a little bit better weather. But as a project, Spring is almost the some would say that it is a de facto standard for making web applications on the JVM.
Yes, but that's not the only framework we have in Java ecosystem, and especially in Kotlin. So today I would like to talk about Ktor, because that's another exciting project that we run at JetBrains for Kotlin. It's not part of Kotlin project. It's a open source project on its own, but developed by a team at JetBrains, which is a separate team. And they make this small, exciting framework, which is open source, Apache 2.0 license, I think. And it's pretty minimalistic, so it's very different from what Spring is. Spring comes with the batteries out of the box, right? You have all the batteries included. And in Ktor, it's more like you have to build, your stack yourself. There are integrations, there are plugins, but it doesn't have that many integrations out of the box as Spring has.
I've heard about Ktor a couple of times, and I think it would be very, very interesting to look at it in more details and just check maybe sample applications, check and listen to you what it is good at. Talking about integrations and this approach, would it be fair to compare, like if the frameworks would be languages, then Spring would be sort of like Java, where there is a big standard library, there are a ton of resources, there are a ton of projects around this core ecosystem that provides every and all possible integrations. And Ktor would be a little bit like JavaScript, where the standard library is much smaller, but it's equally powerful.
It's
as
a very
language.
philosophical question. Like, depends how you look at it, because the Java standard library, Kotlin builds on top of Java standard library. So it's kind of, if you look at it with a little bit different angle, maybe Kotlin's standard library and the ecosystem is even larger than for Java, because you can use all the Java libraries plus Kotlin libraries.
Yes, that is true. That is true. Kotlin definitely builds on Java. And yeah, it was a little bit of a trick question, Kevin. So it also depends on how you look at JavaScript. I know that some people have mixed feelings towards that. So I personally think it's a great language. So I would be happy to be compared to JavaScript. It is more popular than Spring, and there are like a ton of devices running JavaScript, way more than Java. Anyway, let's talk about Ktor. Let's talk about Ktor before we go fully into the programming language wars. Can you maybe show us a little bit and talk about what Ktor is good for?
Right. Let's get our screen in front of us. So that's the web page, right? That's the home page of Ktor. You can see this small snippet of code that basically builds a single small application with Ktor and declares an endpoint at the root, right? And responds with hello world. That's a full application. Like, basically need not more than that to actually start with it. Of course, if we start building real apps, you would question, how do I interact with database? How do I do security? Can I respond via WebSocket or something else? And there is a number of integrations. If we look in the docs, let's check. There's like a server Ktor, and there is a client as well. So that's the HTTP client. And currently, the server part is JVM based. So if you build a service with Ktor framework, it will be running on JVM. But the client is multi-platform, because Kotlin is a multi-platform language. It was built as JVM first language, but then it kind of transformed into something that is targeting multiple platforms, like native platforms, Android, web with JavaScript. Basically, it translates to JavaScript as well. And last year we actually started with WebAssembly support. So the client part is multi-platform. You can use it in different targets, but what we are talking about today is this server part, the JVM part. And if you look into developing applications, you can see there is like a number of interesting features like included. Of course, routing. Like, if routing wasn't there, then basically there is no framework, right? Routing is the integral part of the framework. Templating, there is support for various templates. There are like different ways of handling the requests. Content negotiation and support for serialization through, like, plugging in Jackson, JSON, Kotlin X serialization. So you can work with sessions, of course, authentication, authorization. There is some monitoring support and administration, of course, but that's very minimal. Otherwise, the framework actually started as a test bed for Kotlin project. So we would, test our latest and greatest features in the framework and verify if, for instance, coroutines work like on a larger scale. But now actually we have some products building on top of Ktor, like Space, JetBrains Space, for instance, is building on top of Ktor, so it's everywhere. We have some other products built on that, on top of that, and some internal projects, some infrastructure projects built with Ktor as well. And the community it's not as big as for Spring, of course, but well, it's pretty vibrant. The people are actively supporting, like submitting issues. That's one indication that the project is relevant to someone. Someone is using it and requesting features and reporting bugs. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, if there are no issues, that is the first sign that there is a limited
there is
adoption.
no users,
Yeah.
right? And there is some support for testing, of course. And but the team is working towards version 2.0. Basically, that's a cleanup. That's a big cleanup of all the technical debt that they had, accumulated over the years. And they are changing the plugins API, so it would be easier to implement plugins basically just by creating a function or something like that, and then you basically create a plugin already for Ktor. And as I mentioned, testing. So
when you say plugin, do I understand correctly that this is sort of an interceptor that will work with the requests and responses and do something like in a middleware type of thing?
Exactly.
Okay, good. So this is more this middleware business logic encapsulation unit rather than like a plugin for IDE that does something.
Right. Not for the IDE. We do have a IDE plugin for Ktor, and it adds some, it's a usability and productivity features for Ktor, but it's not essential. So you can easily write web applications without this plugin as well.
Yeah. Okay. It looks very cool, and I like that there is somewhere I saw there on the website that one of the distinguishing features for Ktor is its first-class support for asynchronous programming model that Kotlin provides. Right. So this like the based on coroutines, which is one thing that kind of separates Kotlin from being just
if you look at the average application with Ktor, when you open it in the IDE, you will actually see a lot of asynchronous or suspending functions, let's say. A lot of gutter icons indicating that you have those non-blocking calls.
Nice, cool. Do you have an application that we can look at?
Sure. I have one that I have built for the webinar that I've been running in December. That's like those who watch the stream, they can check out my GitHub account, Anton Arhipov, and then there is a repository called Ktor WS Chat. So that repository, this demo application, is based on something we already have at the playground, play.kotlinlang.org. And if you go to where's that? I think it was teach. Oh, they removed it. Damn it! They removed it, but it probably was moved to Ktor's documentation because it's a Ktor project. Let's see. Tutorials maybe.
While they're looking at that, this is one feature that I absolutely love from the Kotlin website is this live text area where you can, it's not a text area, it's a like sort of like ID like shell where you can write code and then you can evaluate that, and there is somehow there is a backend for that, and it can compile Kotlin to JavaScript and run it locally in the browser. That thing is a marvel.
And I can tell you more. That evaluation thingy, when you press the button, it actually sends a snippet of code to AWS Lambda and runs it there, and it's pretty fast still. So there is like the startup time is still pretty good. So I found it. It's under Learn, and there is this WebSocket chat application. So
Hmm.
that was the base for my demo. But then, since I was running the webinar, I wanted to show something else, not just this walking through this tutorial like step by step. I added some persistence support. Like basically, it's a chat with WebSockets, and then all the messages would be persisted in the database. Uh,
Right.
that's I have it
Sounds
open.
reasonable.
Yeah, so I have it open. I was playing around it with it, so you can see some of the files are modified. But anyways, it's basically the initial state with which I finished at the webinar in December. And here you can see the configuration file on the screen. Like this is the standard configuration we have in Ktor. This small stanza here where we have two blocks: the deployment block and the application block. And the deployment block is basically about defining the port and or maybe some extra properties for the deployment for your application. And then there is the application block where you specify the modules. Modules are sort of just a convention. In fact, the modules are like comma separated list of functions that are defined in your application. So if I navigate to this module here, it actually ends up in this function, right? So it's just an extension function to the application class, and we define it as an extension function because we need access to kind of predefined variables or to the environment to get access to the configuration, to then get access to some default behavior that we might want to override, and so on. So it's just a nice shortcut. Otherwise, we can probably just get away without that as well. Um, and then I have this storage part that I have defined for myself. In Ktor, there is no support for any of the database access libraries out of box. So there is no integration with, JPA, JDBC, Spring Data, or anything like that. So whatever you want, you can choose yourself and just start using it as a library. And in this project, I'm using Exposed. That's another project developed by someone at JetBrains, also open source. But even though it's developed by someone at JetBrains, it's not part of Kotlin. It's just another open source project. And since I don't have any standard way of accessing the database in Ktor, I mean the conventional way, then I have to make up it myself. Basically, I have to invent my own way to configure it, and this is how I done it. Like I defined a storage part, and then I just pass in the properties for configuring the data source. That's it. And I was playing with H2, of course, because it's so simple, and I had no intention to deploy it somewhere in the cloud or in production. But obviously, I've played with Postgres as well.
Nice. Nice. And okay. And the whole application, you said it's a chat, right?
It's a chat, and we can even start it. Like before we actually look into the code, let me start the application. So it starts up, and let's see. When it starts, it actually prints the effective configuration. So you would see immediately what's in there, like which configuration did it pick up. We can see some configuration parameters for the Hikari data source or connection pool, and
Okay.
then there are some debug messages, whatever, and it runs on a port 8080. There is no endpoint for get and post. There is just the WebSocket endpoint right now, which is chat. So I need a chat client or like WebSocket client to actually interact with this application. So let's see. I have one installed in my Chrome. I hope it works. Where is that? Okay, it's here. So we can connect to the chat to the running application. It runs on my machine right now. So localhost 8080, and then it runs on chat endpoint. So if I connect, it should connect. The connection status is open, and it welcomes me. Hey, welcome to the chat. There is one user online. That's me. And then I can send the messages. For some reason, this client, this extension to Chrome, requires me to write messages in JSON format. So I have to do it like this: message, and then maybe say hello, something like this. So send, boom. I'm sending the messages. If I had another connection open to the same application, another client, he would receive the message, and they would interact. That's basically nothing very special. But let's look at the code. What is happening there? At first, if you don't know Ktor, like we should probably explain some of the things. It starts from main, of course. It's just like you have a main function that's the entry point to your application, but then we invoke one of the engines that we have at the web page. When you go to the web page, Ktor.io, you can see this example, right? So there is embedded server, and you say neti. This is like the way, or this is the snippet of code that starts the server without any configuration. When you want to configure it somehow yourself, you have this application.conf file. Then we start using a specific engine from Ktor, and there's like, if I say specific one, then it means that there are multiple of them. Like the standard one that we suggest by default is neti, but then there is also Tomcat, Jetty, and so-called CIO, which stands for coroutines IO. That's a Kotlin, like 100% Kotlin engine that should be multi-platform one day. Meaning that you would write a server-side application in Kotlin, and then depending on your requirements, you may run it on JVM or on Node.js, or even without runtime, without this server component, just on bare metal. Okay, so we choose neti engine, and then we just call main on that one, and that's it. So basically, we if we start from the command line and our application is packaged, we would just invoke this class instead of our own main. So that's just for convenience. We have an entry point right in the ID. And then when it starts reading the configuration. And in the configuration, we have this module configured, right? The single function that we have in our application, and it implements all the interaction logic for the chat. So when we get here, we explicitly say that we want to use WebSockets functionality. To say that it's basically a plugin that implements WebSockets. We should say install, and then call the feature. Like basically, if we want some more features, install the
Like install
completion. Yeah,
security.
install security or free marker or whatever else. This is the feature provided by Ktor plugin in the IDE. So when you type install, it will actually suggest you not just random classes, but actually those plugins that are available in your class path.
Oh, this is amazing. I just recently got another, like I saw an example where ID autocomplete and ID suggestions are sort of the as far as it goes when developers are willing to look for help, right? If it's not in the ID autocomplete, it might, and it's somewhere in the docs, it might as well not exist very, very often, right? So the first instinct would be to check, oh, what can I install?
And another great feature of this is that it's not just install. You can actually provide some configuration for this plugin as well, like frame size, ping period, timeout, and so on. But sometimes you don't even know that, and therefore this auto completion, when it actually completes something, let's say I'm doing it like this again, WebSockets, then it will autocomplete with code generation. It will generate these properties for you, so you know that there are some properties, not all of them. It will not fill everything, but at least something, and then you will discover that, hey, I probably want to configure something else. But it's not obligatory. Of course, there are default values, so you don't have to do this configuration yourself. The next thing that I did was to integrate with the database. So this is the function that calls to the configuration. I'm getting this config from the application class because this was already initialized when the engine was starting. So I have some properties in there. And when I go to this init database, this is what I had like to do myself, right? There is no module out of the box for integrating with databases. So I had to write some code to parse the configuration file, read out the properties, uh, the driver name, database URL, user password, and then basically by hand, customly, like initialize the database connection. This database class here with the static function is coming from exposed, I guess. Yes, that's org JetBrains exposed. Basically, that's the entry point that manages all the connections with to the database in exposed.
That's pretty
So
cool.
when
I saw, sorry to interrupt. I saw a very cool thing that I want you to explain a little bit. There,
uh
at the end of the init database function, you had a schema utils create messages, and messages looks like a normal Java object or Java class.
it's actually an object that derives from the table. Table is also a type that is coming from exposed. And this way we say that, okay, this is the model, this is the data model that you should use for um, for database. We use
Right.
this class, and then exposed can parse this class and generate the appropriate table in the database when it's starting.
That is very cool because that means that you don't have to create like a schema SQL file or anything like that, and you just work with the, again, auto completed by the ID, sort of a DSL, right? There is a
It's very simple to use, I would say. That's pretty pleasant.
yeah,
And
that is cool.
there and the rest that we have is just basically this facade, the DAO facade class, right? The interface with a couple of functions implemented with this DSL that is provided by Exposed. And we can see a little helper function here, db query, which is suspending function. That's about this asynchronous, nature of Ktor, where you have a framework that is asynchronous and everything is asynchronous, but then you have this database that to which you are talking via JDBC, and that's not asynchronous. So there is a function, like a helper function, that basically manages offloading this interaction through JDBC into another pool, and kind of it models this asynchronous behavior. It's not really asynchronous when you talk to the database through this connection, but in regards to the application itself, it makes itself like asynchronous.
Right.
All right,
That's cool. That's cool. You
that's
can also
that's
prob you
that's
can also
basically the
sorry.
whole database layer that we have. Nothing else.
Yeah. I like that very much. And DAO facade implementation looks very Java-like to me. I feel at home in this class, so I like it very much.
Right. So the rest is basically this WebSocket interaction. You have a client, a user connecting to the endpoint. We saw it in the browser when I was connecting, through this thingy. And then if it connects, then it just keeps track of those connections. the application. So it registers a connection, and there's just a list of those connections, and the rest is about sending and receiving messages. So since we are working within WebSocket server session, we have some variables or like variables or channels available in this context, like incoming channel, for instance. That's what we need, like, to receive the messages. And then for every connection, we also have a session which has a send method, so we can send the messages further. We receive a message and then we send this message further to the rest of the clients or to rest of the connections that we have registered, whoever connected. But in the middle there, we also have a persistence for the messages, so we just send the message to the database. The interesting part here is that when we receive the message, text message, we read it from the frame. And then, because like in WebSockets, you have different frames. You have text frames, you have closed, you have rejected, whatever. There's like several of those. You receive the message and you kind of compose the new string and you send the message. But this database call is not involved in the flow. It's kind of there in the middle. Something is happening. We are asynchronously sending this text to the database, but to send this message, we are not making a select, to the database. We are not querying anything. We just work with the value that we have in our program, and that's it. And when someone disconnects, we just remove it from the list of the connections, and that's it. That's the whole application logic that we have. Testing, of web applications is trickier than just writing unit tests, especially if it's asynchronous. So I was pretty lazy to actually implement any tests in December, but now you motivated me to look into it, and well, let's see what we can do, what we can test there.
Excellent. I think this is the prime example of the conference-driven development, where you implement features driven by public engagements in the community. Right. I think this is very cool. The logic of the application is very simple. I like how, if you haven't seen a lot of Kotlin applications in the wild, I like how the IDE kind of has this symbol in the gutter there on the left, showing that certain calls are suspend functions.
Right.
So the IDE kind of sort of helps me to understand that those are not blocking, and they just go in. I think this is my experience with Kotlin is not very extensive, but I don't know if I would write this on my first try, but I can certainly read and modify it on my first try. So this looks very, very nice. Right.
Okay.
So show me the test. Show me the test. We are, after all, on Testcontainers Live, and we would like to see the tests.
All right. So this is, since the project was generated from a starter, there is like a, as for Spring, you have start.spring.io. We have also start.ktor.io, and I think we have the same wizard in the IDE as well. So this project was initially just generated, and this test was also generated. I was too lazy to actually run it, so you can see if I run, it will actually fail. I only fixed it in a way that it compiles, but well, let's see how it works. It runs and it fails.
So unlike Haskell, Kotlin can compile and
can
still
just compile. Right.
Okay.
See. Oh, the database is already in use because the application is running. Stop. Of course,
Okay,
we don't need it anymore.
Right. Let's get this out of the way. So you want to run the test against the in-memory H2 database, and that is just that's not how you would do it in the industry, right? This is not how you do in any serious
This
project.
was the way we did it like 10 years ago, or even more.
Yes.
Before Docker appeared.
Before Docker and before Testcontainers appeared. So let's try, like now we have a little bit of time, let's try to make this test into a more appropriate shape. and let's introduce test containers into the project, and let's write a more integration test that actually checks the business logic of the application, working with an actual like production level technologies like you
So
said,
I did my
Postgres.
homework. And I even added some dependencies to the project, so I don't have to download them, while streaming the screen share. Otherwise, it will take time. So I have test containers. I have the module for Postgres, and I have a few interesting libraries in the class path as well, like a utility and SRJ. And what do we test? How do we test? What makes sense to actually test in this kind of application? We have a chat that where with an endpoint that receives messages and sends messages and persists something in the database. My intuition tells me that if I have a such application, it makes sense to send something to the application and then verify if the result that I expect from this interaction is actually visible in the database.
Yes, that would be an integration test for sure, right? So we're gonna send the messages into a WebSocket connected to our application, and then we're gonna send messages, and after we send them, we would expect them to appear in the database.
Right.
Another thing would be to expect them to appear in, like, if we connect another channel, another client, maybe we get the messages there, but we'll see if we do this more complex scenario or just do the database check first. Okay, let's do this.
So for that, we need a database to start, right?
Yes.
A proper database, and the database that would be something else than H2.
Yeah, remove this.
I probably would go with Postgres because that's the only option I have pre-configured in my properties file. And then as far as I remember, I need a container instance declared as a field in my tests.
Yes, of course. So you have the dependencies on test containers, which means that you have the API to manage your Dockerized dependencies programmatically. So you have the Postgres module dependency also included. So you can just say a new Postgres container, which you do.
In Kotlin, I don't need to write new. I just can go with this one.
You just instantiate that, and then I think you need to provide a Docker name and tag for this, right? So that would be PostgreSQL.
Postgres.
I think it's QL. Maybe it's not. Let's see. Well, we'll see.
Let's see. If it fails, it fails.
I think yes. So 14 Alpine is one of the latest versions that we can test, and we can also. So most of the configuration. Why having a module for test containers is such an excellent idea is because it encapsulates both the best practices for testing from the test containers point of view, but also the configuration and best practice from the sort of the technology point of view. So Postgres container knows that it's a database, so you can configure normal things for the database, such as username, database names, and other things. Initialize maybe some schema, which we don't need because we had that marvelous feat of engineering there. So yeah, we can say with username, with password, with database name. There are some default values anyhow, but we can explicitly set them up if you want. And then get this container, we need to start it. So it needs to run.
I think we could do that either like in the beginning of everything or in the beginning of each test. How do you prefer?
So I don't have the important part here is that what we want to achieve, the setup that we want to achieve. We want to run the container. It will programmatically, so within the Docker container, right? Database binds on certain ports. And those ports need to be exposed to your host machine, to your application, so the database is actually visible. And on your host machine, those ports will be randomly chosen among the open ports. So there is no one-to-one mapping. If Postgres runs by default on, say, port 6543 or any whatever port that is, it's not necessarily will be the port 56, the same port outside, because maybe you want to run two Postgres containers at the same time. So Testcontainers takes that out of the picture, assigns you a random port, and assigns you this dynamic configuration. So the deal here is that we want to start the container, and after it's started, take the JDBC URL and other config parameters to connect to this Postgres instance and configure your application to use those instead of the predefined values in your application properties.
Okay.
So I guess
we can just do it like this. I think for now, just call start whenever we just declare it, right?
Right.
It should work.
Yeah. Does it work? It's a very neat trick in Kotlin.
Yep.
If it does that. So there is a builder pattern for the configuration, and this also it assigns the Postgres container to the field, right? And then it also runs start method on it. That is very neat. Color me impressed.
Okay, so when the test initializes, the test class is created, we initialize the field, we start the container, and then we proceed with the test. And here we have this Ktor feature called with application. Actually, when you generate this project, it will be with test application. I think they will generate with test application call, but then it does not expect, for now, it's just not part of the design. They don't expect you to override the properties. And basically, it will call this parsing of the configuration internally, and you won't have any control over properties, and you need to override them if you work with a database. All right.
Oh.
So instead, I'm using this with application function. That's also like a part of the API, and that function can actually take the environment as a parameter. What's environment? What is that? Like if I put this type explicitly, that's the application engine environment. So for the test, it will have this time it will have a custom application engine environment with overridden properties for the database. This is sort of the same thing that we do with Spring when we have this dynamic property source. I hope people know what it is, because that's a very neat feature. When you test something and you need to override properties, dynamic properties source is your friend. So in that function, all this magic is going to happen. Not magic, but a hard work that Oleg mentioned. We are going to read in the configuration like this. And we are going to provide our own properties for the storage, right? For the database, we need JDBC URL, and we need a driver class name. So we will, since the container already started, we can ask for the JDBC URL from the container. Where is it running? And override the property that is defined in the application.conf file. So instead of this, we are going to have something custom in our test specifically. And
Okay.
then we load the original one, and then we just merge them together, where we say that our custom properties have the priority. That's it.
Okay, makes sense. And then we wrap it into the appropriate type to save as a configuration in this application engine environment thing that we return from here. Good.
Exactly.
Okay, so
that's a lot of custom work, I would say. I wish Ktor provided this out of the box, but I think I will file a feature request for that, so it would be much easier to test. Because otherwise, without test containers, there just wasn't a use case for for this kind of dynamic properties overriding. Everybody was using H2 for the tests, or just starting the database manually. And now with test containers, you get this kind of automation that you can kind of need to dynamically override those properties. Okay.
Yeah,
So we
that's a
have
good
this
call.
entry. So we
That's a
have
good
this
call.
entry, and we don't need this, I think, anymore. We can just proceed writing the real test. And what do we start with? When the application starts, the database is empty, so we can actually check that, right? And we have for that we have this DAO class, DAO facade impl. I don't want to do this with such a long name, DAO facade impl. And then I would need to get like messages, DAO, get messages. I will read the messages from the database. But this is like asynchronous call, and it should be executed within a special context. And in Kotlin, we have run blocking for that. So let me move it right here. And okay, that returns some messages, right?
Right. And we can run some asserts on those, right? So
Exactly.
you
So we let me see.
we imported the assert.j library. So I think if you just type something like assert that and pass
Ah,
whatever this is, this run blocking lambda into it. So as the thing, then you can assert.
assert, I assert that. Yep.
Yeah, and so
Then,
this run
oh,
blocking goes into it like
I
that, and
assert.
then you can assert that this whole thing is empty.
Then I probably don't need to assign anything here, and I can just check if it is
Is empty.
empty.
Yeah, is empty.
No? Oh, I deleted too much.
No, DAO. It was DAO get
Now,
messages.
exactly. Is empty. Please, yes, it works. So, and I
Yes.
probably don't need to write that many lines. I can just put it a one liner here. Okay.
Beautiful,
Uh,
concise. Now this is a functional test actually. If we
we
run
can
this,
check.
yeah, we can check that actually the application wires together, that the database starts, that the application gets configured with the database access, and then that we are actually are able to execute the SQL query towards that for against the database. While it prints awful lot of configuration there and logs, I urge you to go to the testcontainers.org. Go to testcontainers.org and
Yep.
you type logging in the search field.
Oh, yeah.
And there is the
Logging.
recommended logback configuration. You grab that and you put that into your application properties somewhere.
Yep. I have it now.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think Docker Java is a little bit verbose because it logs a lot about. It's not
Yeah.
a
So
bad thing, but by default it logs a lot of interactions with any Docker container that it starts
right.
and manages. So
Now we need to interact with the WebSocket somehow.
right, did
And
this work?
for
Did the test work? I didn't see.
yes, it
Oh, it was
succeeded.
great. It succeeded.
Was
Very,
running.
very good.
Perfect. So we need to interact with the WebSocket somehow from the test, meaning that our test will be like a client to the application. And what we need is to use this handle WebSocket conversation function. You can get an information about that in the documentation for WebSockets. Here we have a testing part, which is not very long, but well, it basically all you need. Uh, Probably just to interact with WebSockets. There is a handle WebSocket conversation function, and in that function, in the block that comes from like as a parameter, there are two variables, the implicit variables, the incoming and outgoing. And by those names, you can probably guess that's one of them is the incoming queue of messages, and the other one is the outgoing queue of messages. Um, okay, and then since we are interacting with the chat endpoint, we need that, and then we need incoming and outgoing variables. All right. So what else? Like when the client connects for the first time to our application, the application will send a greeting message, and we don't need that. We can ignore it, but we still need to read it out from the incoming channel. So the first thing that we do is we're gonna receive a message that is a welcome message, and we are going to ignore it. So ignore like that.
Okay, fair enough.
And then we would probably just need to send something, because our first interaction with the WebSocket, with the chat, is sending something, right? There is no one else besides us when we connect there, and all we need to do is to send something. So outgoing, and then we need to send something, and that's going to be a frame. That's going to be a text frame, actually. Frame, I think it should be this. Yep. And since it's a text frame, obviously it takes a string as a parameter. Let's send a message tests containers, something like this, and that's it. To actually trigger the application further, I think we need to call receive. I was experimenting with that, and we need to call receive here and ignore it again.
Right. It's
Why? Why? Because
we
I suspect that the internals are using the rendezvous channel, and the rendezvous channel is a channel with with size of one. So basically, you won't be able to do anything else besides, you won't be able to send anything else before you read this element out of that channel again. So
Okay.
it's kind of synchronous in this way. I think it's done for testing, but I have to verify that. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure that we have to do it. So, but I need to verify why is it so. I'm not sure if the internal channel is really a rendezvous channel. And then where are we? We have sent the message, and now obviously this message, if you remember the application logic, this message will be forwarded to all the other clients that have connected to the chat.
Yes.
But meanwhile, while it's sending, we are also writing this message to a database. And if you recall, that was the asynchronous operation.
Yes, it
So
was a
it
suspend
might,
function.
right, it might happen that if we try reading it from the database, even though we have already sent this message, to the application, when we go right after and we try to read this message from the database, it might not be there yet, because there is some application logic, there are some delays. It happens out like asynchronously. We don't know when it appears. So if we try checking for the message right after sending it, we probably will fail. We have to retry a couple of times maybe, and have some heuristics around it.
Yeah,
So
we need to wait until the message is there, right? And we hope that eventually it will be there. So you're saying that if we just do DAO get messages, it doesn't have to. It might happen that there is no message yet in the database, right?
yeah. So
Cool.
we
So
need something to wait for some time, maybe, or
excellent.
try multiple times.
Excellent. I recall you added the awaitility library to
Yep.
your dependencies. Let's use that.
Yep.
So
I've heard it works for checking repeatedly for some of the things, and it has an await function. So
yes. So the await function gives you the factory for conditions, and we use awaitility quite a bit in the test containers implementation themselves, right? When we start the containers, we would like to wait for certain conditions that the container has started, that the ports are open, and so on, right? Or there are certain log messages. What you want here is until. The method is called until, and you provide it with a condition. In the await method, in the await, you can also pass a string that describes the condition you're waiting for, but that's not strictly necessary. So we wait until a certain thing is happening, and we need it.
That must be a Boolean, right? So we actually have to check until some condition is met.
Yes,
right?
yes. So
and this condition means that the messages or the number of messages in the database is greater than 0 in our case.
Well, yes, work. Yes. We send one message, so I would expect the number of messages be 1. But we can relax that to being greater than 0.
Is not empty. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is not empty. Is not empty.
If you run it this way, how many times it will actually poll the database? Is there like a limit, or can we say that, hey, I am not willing to wait and like more than 1 second or anything?
Yes. So by default, I think it has a timeout of something like 10 seconds. But we can also say at most and provide the duration how much we. I think after a wait. I'm not sure what's the DSL, but yeah, after a wait, if you do at most, you can do at least as well. At most, and then the duration. So like say what, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 days. That'll be a long
2 days. All right. Okay.
Right. 2 seconds sounds fair, right? Maybe you have a very poor Wi-Fi, or maybe a Wi-Fi channel is, I don't know, anything could happen. But it won't wait, like your test will not be longer than like 2 seconds that you're waiting here, right? And so after let's
try that.
Yeah, so we will either fail this utility. We would also make sense to maybe include some sort of assert after, but yeah.
Let's see. Okay,
so this passes.
Passing, but let's assert something.
No, let's make it fail. So if you do messages size like larger than 1 or larger than 2, so just make this condition not do something, right? And I don't know. I don't know. Print something as well here. Let's see how many times it will do this. Just print. Oleg is curious. Okay, anything. Yeah.
Checking. All right. So if I execute the test again.
So now we will expect it to fail because we actually send one message, and the await utility will never wait until there is more than one message because it's only one. And after 2 seconds, it will just stop checking. So it's checking, failed. Because
failed. And how many times it was able to check? 1, 2, 3, 4 times.
It's like every half a second or something like
and
this.
And so basically, after the timeout of 2 seconds, we decided to kill it. And since we didn't get this condition, to true, then it's a failure.
Yeah, it's a very convenient library for asynchronous code. So make it back like non-empty or size equal to 1, which would be correct.
It's not empty.
Yeah.
That one. And then it probably would make sense to assert something. Probably now not through the database, but get the message back from the application and then assert if this is the message we expect. So for that, we need another interaction with the WebSocket. Again, chat.
You can probably just copy that.
Oh yeah. Let's do it.
So if we want another client, we can just create another client here, and then it will still receive this welcome message that we want to ignore, but then we'll send nothing, but we try to receive a message that will be Testcontainers.
Yeah, so we need the same thingy. Oh,
yeah, and we can just do assert that.
We need to cast it to frame, the proper frame type. Frame text.
Okay.
And then read something from there. So read text like this.
So this is our
Okay, yeah.
message, right? This is our message now, right? And
So
then
you need to verify if that message contains something.
right, do the same thing. Assert that message contains
That message of the completion contains.
No, it's after the parentheses.
Oh,
Yeah, like you assert that, and then assert J offers you API, so just like you can do like matchers in this Fluent style.
so that was the string we have sent.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is the preferred method for Kotlin applications to certain things, but it is a very, very convenient library on the JVM. So
I mean, you can take all the practices with you into Kotlin applications that you have learned in Java, and then adopt as you learn the language. So it's totally fine to use assert.j the way you used it, and it seems to be working great.
Excellent. So this is now a proper integration test where we actually connect two WebSocket clients to our application running as a Java process on our machine. And then it spins up the Postgres container, and we write some messages into that. And then we read some messages from the application through another WebSocket client, right? And we verify that this is the same message that we sent. I think this is an absolute win, and I think this is way, way better and more representative of the tests that I would like to see in the industry than we had before.
Nice. Testing with a real database. And yeah, the interaction is pretty simple. We interact with the application, we verify something from the storage that the application did what we expect, and then we try to interact with the application again, depending on what the application does. So
Right.
this is the way I would test any web application, basically. The only difference with test containers, and it's very beneficial, is that we automate all the interaction with Docker by using this API, an awesome API. I think like it's very very convenient to just declare, hey, I want this container of this type, of this version, and with some kind of container specific properties, and that's it. I don't have to mess around with Docker files or Docker Compose or anything like that.
Yeah. If you would like to test against Oracle, whether this web chat works with the Oracle database, do you know what you have to do? You have to add a dependency on the Oracle module from Testcontainers and replace Postgres container with an Oracle container. So which is very, very flexible. We have a message in the chat there, a question actually, which I think deserves some attention. How to reuse Testcontainers and Ktor test application for all the tests? And there are two parts of the question. I can take on the test container reuse, and you can think about the Ktor test applications for a bit. Right. Thank you for the question. We like to keep this interactive, so keep them coming. Testcontainers offers you a very flexible API to control the lifecycle of your all Dockerized dependencies. It doesn't have to be database, could be Kafka, could be Elasticsearch, could be WireMock for other things. And sometimes indeed you want to recreate the new containers and restart them for every test or even test method to ensure the isolation of the test cases, and just because you can. And sometimes you want a different setup where you have a container per class or a container per like a test suite. And you can do that. So here I would say, like, we are currently having a field on the test class, and it's an instance field, right? So we start this for every test instance. If, for example, we would have a hierarchy of classes and move this field into a parent class that will be the parent for all our classes, and then we make it a static field, then we would run this initialization logic only once, right? Only once.
We could do something like this, I think, and then derive from the base test, and then
Right. And then we make
say
it
that
static.
it should be JVM static.
Right. Okay. I thought it would involve some companion objects, but if you say that this works like this, then
oh yeah,
then this
yes, it should be in companion object.
right. But in a nutshell, since you are controlling the life cycle of your Dockerized dependencies, you can do any architectures that you want. If you have a test suite where you have some tests that that are designed to like sort of destroy the database schema or overload your Kafka with so many messages that it gets to halt, if you can achieve that, then probably you want to separate those. But if you just want once per JVM process, then you would do this, right? I think now any application test derived from the base test would get access to the same container, and they will all share that. So you can share it within the same JVM process. There are also additional API to even more involved lifecycle of the test container containers. But I think this answers the question for now.
As for the Ktor part of the question, I think I never had a thought about this. Like, if you have many tests, do you want to keep just one application? But I suspect that since this with application returns a value, it returns a type here, then maybe it should be possible to kind of create this environment once and then configuration once, but then it still executes the engine and stops the engine. Probably, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just my intuition that tells me that maybe you can assign a result of some pre-configuration for into a field or something, and then reuse it among tests. But this is not something I have seen very often being done in the tests so far.
I mean, you can probably do, since this is also like we manually wrap everything with application, we can probably create a separate wrapper that doesn't recreate the application, but that uses a cached one or something like this.
Yep.
So with singleton application, and that wrapper would return the same instance again and again and again if you want to, and then you will have control when you use that or when you don't want to use that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think this was very, very cool. I think we achieved quite a bit of looking into Ktor and getting acquainted with that. I think we wrote a pretty decent test. I would be happy to see a test like this in the production code base. Yeah, so thank you very much, Anton, for this. If I have any more questions about Kotlin, combination Kotlin, test containers, and Ktor, now is the right time to ask them.
Well, while people are thinking if it makes sense to ask the question or not, so let's recap. We have Ktor at ktor.io, the website URL. If you want to check out the source code for the demo we have used today, it's in my GitHub repository, github.com/Anton Arhipov, and you will find a Ktor demo application there, like Ktor WS chat. And if you want to learn more about Kotlin or like the applications, how we use Kotlin and for which frameworks, maybe you want to learn about Kotlin with Spring instead of Ktor, then youtube.com/Kotlin. All kind of things that are coming from the Kotlin team, not only by me, but by my awesome colleagues as well. Sebastian Eigner, Katerina Petrova, and others. So subscribe, hit that bell,
Enable
to
the
get the notification,
notifications, as they say.
right?
Right.
And
Excellent.
enjoy.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anton, for coming here today, and thank you for showing me a little bit of Kotlin. I like that very, very much, and I appreciate your time and effort into improving the test coverage of the sample application.
Nice.
I don't think we
All right.
see any questions here, so thanks a lot, and we say goodbyes. And I will see all of you, our YouTube viewers, next time on the stream, which probably will be in a few weeks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anton, once again. Bye.
Bye.